It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Russia's biggest aerial assault of the Ukraine war as more than 100 missiles kill at least 31 people across the country. Israel's continued assault against Hamas in Gaza as the country faces potential action over alleged genocide at the United Nations top court. Kind, caring, devoted. Tributes paid to a man hit and killed by a car in Sheffield as he tried to save a stranger. The three men who died after their vehicle was swept away as they attempted to cross a river in North Yorkshire are named. A warning about the welfare of top football stars, with some players facing as many as 80 games in a season. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview at past. Evening all. Russia today launched what Ukraine says is the biggest air assault on its territory of the war so far. 122 missiles and 26 drones were used in the attack, and at least 31 people were killed. At a meeting of the UN Security Council this evening, the United States, France and the UK condemned the attacks as a desperate and futile attempt by Russia to regain momentum. One of the missiles appears to have entered a NATO member's airspace, with Poland saying that everything indicates the object flew over 20 miles inside its borders. The wave of attacks began overnight and struck nationwide. Damage and casualties were reported from as far as Lviv in the west to the cities of Dnipro and Kharkiv in the east to Odessa in the south, as well as in the capital, Kyiv. Our international correspondent John Sparks has our first report.
The Ukrainians called it the most massive attack, and the aftermath was captured in a child's bedroom in Kyiv and on the capital streets down below. The Russian bombardment was waged over 18 agonizing hours, and it has left much of the city covered in bits of glass and metal. Residents surveyed the scene in trepidation.
The new year is coming, a joy for us, but I knew things wouldn't go well, that they would attack with all their might. I had a premonition.
The assault was both immense and indiscriminate. Factories and schools, shops and homes struck by Russian weaponry. This block in Odessa was hit by a notorious Shahid drone. An MP representing the city said Russia was targeting morale.
Russia still hopes to achieve its goals, and one of their goals is terror against civilians and people trying to kill morale inside the country at the time of Christmas and New Year holidays. So nothing new from Russia being a terrorist state, but it's been very painful.
Russia's aerial assault may signal the beginning of a major winter offensive, with their troops now seizing territory in key locations on the Eastern Front. The Ukrainians find themselves under increasing pressure on the battlefield and in the air. The UK has announced the shipment of hundreds of air defence missiles to help bolster dwindling supplies. Such assistance is badly needed. Of 158 weapons fired by the Russians, dozens made it through, with a missile obliterating part of this shopping mall in Dnipro. Officials said a maternity hospital was also damaged in the attack. The effects of this aerial assault were also experienced in neighboring Poland, a Russian missile flying through that country's airspace before heading to Ukraine. Everything indicates that a Russian weapon crossed our borders, said the head of the Polish army. It was the worst day in a very long time, said one official, as Ukraine confronts an emboldened and determined enemy in the depths of winter. John Sparks, Sky News.
Focus on that apparent incursion into Polish airspace with our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins in Berlin for us this evening. Siobhan, just how significant is this, given that you were telling us last hour this has happened before?
This is a reminder of the ongoing danger posed by this war. So what we've been told by Polish officials is that a missile entered their airspace for just under 3 minutes on Friday morning. It travelled around 40 kilometres and it was picked up on their radar. It was also picked up on NATO's radar. It doesn't appear to have caused any damage, but they have sent soldiers to the area on the border to check that there hasn't been any damage and to check the trajectory of this missile. Now, they believe this is a Russian missile. And the reason this is important is because, of course, Poland is a member of NATO, so is covered by that collective defence clause if it were to be attacked. So, of course, we've heard of missiles crossing into other neighbouring countries like Moldova, but that NATO pact is why this has got extra significance. So the NATO chief, for example, has responded saying that he's monitoring the situation and that they've been in touch with Poland. The US is putting out a similar message, but the message from Poland today is that the deputy foreign minister actually called the chargé d'affaires of Russia to speak to them, to explain what has been going on. And interestingly, RIA news agency has quoted the Russian diplomat as saying after that meeting that no proof was presented. My request for documented proof was refused. So clearly Russia is still refuting Poland's line that this was one of their missiles. As you say, though, this isn't the first time that Polish airspace has been breached. November last year, I was actually on the border of Poland with Ukraine after a missile killed 2 people. It was very tense at the time when there was investigations into who that missile belonged to, but most Western powers agree now that that was probably a Ukrainian air defence missile. But this is still important, and the Prime Minister of Poland has had an emergency meeting, so has the President. The message coming from the President's office is that there doesn't appear to be an imminent threat, but a reminder to all of us about how easy it is for this conflict to bubble over.
Siobhan, thank you. Israel tonight finds itself under growing diplomatic pressure after a warning from the United Nations in Gaza that no one was safe, with claims the Israeli military fired at an aid convoy. And this evening, South Africa announced that it had filed a case alleging genocide against Israel with the International Court of Justice, the main judicial organ of the United Nations. Israel has rejected what they called baseless claims, as Nicole Johnston reports now from Jerusalem.
The border town of Rafah, now a city of tents. Almost everyone in Gaza is displaced, and more than 21,000 people have been killed. 3 months ago, Gaza's children went to school. Today, they pick through rubble.
Whoever evacuates a place is better off just staying, because they're liars. They ask you to evacuate and send you to an area, and after many families gather there, they hit you. They're not hitting 2 people, they hit 20 and 30 people.
Israel says it's trying to keep civilians safe, but every day it's carnage. And South Africa has now stepped up the pressure. It's asked the International Court of Justice for an urgent order declaring Israel has breached its obligations under the Genocide Convention. South Africa's court application says Israel's acts are genocidal in character, intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnical group. Israel has rejected the claim, calling it blood libel. In a statement, it said, South Africa's claim lacks both a factual and a legal basis and constitutes despicable and contemptuous exploitation of the court.
The relationship between Israel and the UN in South Africa has hit an all-time low. Israel accuses the UN of bias and of being overly critical. Meanwhile, South Africa compares the plight of Palestinians to that of black South Africans living under apartheid.
Less than 30 minutes after South Africa's move, the Israeli military released this video. Soldiers rig explosives to tunnels built by Hamas. Gaza is riddled with them. Israel insists its war will go on until all the tunnels and Hamas is destroyed. In the south, life is a daily fight for survival. as the winter sets in.
It doesn't matter whether you're an aid worker or a civilian in Gaza right now. Everybody's at risk. Every day the death toll from this conflict continues to rise. We've lost, over 130 of our staff.
These are tender moments, a gentle touch, one last time. While Israel wages war, calls for it to end grow louder. And some Gazans say even death would be better than a life like this. Nicole Johnston, Sky News, Jerusalem.
The family of Chris Marriott, who was killed as he helped a stranger, paid tribute to him, saying he would go to help rather than turn away. The father of two died when a car was driven into a crowd in Sheffield on Wednesday. Sky's Shingi Marariki reports.
Those who knew Christian Marriott say he lived to help others. It will come as a bitter blow that after one final act of selflessness, it's also how he died. The father of two was out with his sons and wife on a walk when he was struck by a car in Sheffield. He'd intervened to help give first aid to a woman he saw lying unconscious in the street. Today in a statement, his family joined those paying him tribute. Chris was a wonderful husband, dad, brother, uncle and friend to many. The circumstances of his death, although tragic and unfathomable to us, his family, show the sort of man he was, to go to help rather than to turn away. The woman he was trying to assist was injured in a violent disturbance involving a number of people. Footage taken that afternoon captures the chaos and the commotion.
And all of a sudden the police start coming and the ambulance, and someone told me there is a people underneath this car. The people try to push the car up in order to pull the people underneath.
This car collided with Christian, the woman he was trying to help, and others. Two men were arrested in connection with the case, both on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. The tributes left to Chris at the scene of his death offer just a small snapshot into how he lived and how widely he was loved. As well as sharing their grief, his family are asking anyone with information to come forward. For a man so central to his church and community, this will be an irreparable loss. But they'll hang on to their memories of a good Samaritan taken too soon. Shinki Marike, Sky News.
Now, this is the time of year when we get details of New Year's honours, but there are reports tonight of the long-awaited resignation honours of the former Prime Minister Liz Truss. Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us from Downing Street. Evening, Rob. I suppose there will be people watching this who are surprised that Liz Truss actually gets a resignation honours list, given the length of her tenure.
Yeah, as you say, Neil, it's completely normal around this time of year to get some names of people being made knights and dames. But I think what we may well get as well is a completely separate list that may surprise some people and may cause a little bit more controversy as well. It's completely usual for prime ministers to get a resignation honours list, to essentially pick out usually close allies, political aides, members of their parties to be put into the House of Lords or to be given a knighthood or a damehood or an OBE. I guess what gives the Liz Truss resignation honours list extra bite is the fact that she was only in Downing Street for, 6 or 7 weeks, because of the economic turmoil that characterised her time in office. And that tension really is being picked up already by some of the front pages as they come out this evening. There have been calls from some opposition politicians for the current occupant of number 10, Rishi Sunak, to step in and block this list. I think that's unlikely. In terms of some of the names that have been speculated on really for months now that may make up Liz Truss's list, there is potentially people like Matthew Elliott, a political strategist, someone that was the chief executive of Vote Leave for a while, Ruth Porter, someone who worked in number 10 as deputy chief of staff for Liz Truss. I think what many people will be watching for is how many names feature who are directly responsible for some of the economic strategy behind Liz Truss's time in office. Yes, there's a broader argument that still goes on in Tory circles about the merits of that wider strategy, but I don't think anyone would disagree that at the time anyway, it wasn't successful. And I think if too many of those people feature in this list, there will be accusations of essentially handing out gongs for failure. Now, allies of Liz Truss say it's a modest list. They say it's focused on long-standing close allies that she's had throughout her lengthy frontline career in politics. So it's not just people that she knew for 6 6 weeks while she was Prime Minister. I think the other interesting aspect to this as well is the timing. As we've said, the New Year's list, the regular list, is also due out tomorrow. I think the fact that Number 10 have decided, or potentially may decide, to publish this at the same time, at a time when MPs are also on holiday, may lead some to wonder whether they're trying to bury the names amid a flurry of other awards and other news. I think given we're heading into an election year, there may well be a desire in Number 10 to try and put a bit of distance between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, to stop any association between him and her somewhat chaotic time in office. But friends of Liz Truss are somewhat perplexed that, given the names were submitted in March, it has taken right up to the Christmas period for them to potentially be published. Not for the first time this year, the picks, the honours of previous past prime ministers having a very present political impact.
Burying bad news, heaven forfend. Rob, for now, thanks very much indeed. The number of anti-Semitic hate crimes recorded by police forces in the UK jumped sharply in the weeks following the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. British Transport Police had one of the largest increases, recording 87 anti-Semitic offences in the month after the 7th of October. Some forces also reported a rise in Islamophobic crimes. Sky's Milena Veselinovic has been taking a look at the numbers.
What started as a normal coffee shop interaction soon turned sour.
I mean, you can be Jewish and also support genocide.
Jacob was working in his family's coffee shop in central London one Sunday when a couple who walked in started challenging him.
He kind of just goes to me, he was like, well, who do you support? And I said, well, I'm Jewish and I've got family in Israel, so, you know, take it as you will. He goes, oh, so you support Israel? I was like, yeah, I'm always going to support Israel. And he was like, oh, I can't shop here, that's disgusting, and then just left. I wouldn't say targeted, because I don't know if the guy came in here knowing I was Jewish, but it felt very kind of, it made it very personal, you know, because, like, you know, I'm very proud of who I am. I'm proud of being Jewish.
The family didn't report what happened to the police, but new figures from forces across the country show a huge spike in anti-Semitic offences in the wake of the Israel-Hamas war. The British Transport Police recorded 87 anti-Semitic offences in the month after the 7th of October attacks, up from just 8 in the same period in 2022. Greater Manchester Police recorded 74, up from 15 that time last year. And the Metropolitan Police noted 218 anti-Semitic offences between the 1st and the 18th of October, up from 15 during that time in 2022.
The figures show that the biggest rise in anti-Semitic offences happened in big cities, and it is the police forces in those cities, and particularly in London, that have been under sustained pressure to crack down on any anti-Semitism during the pro-Palestinian marches. It's left the Jewish community feeling under threat. But the war in the Middle East reflected in a rise in Islamophobia too, the police figures show, though the numbers, experts say, don't tell a full picture.
I think that the level of increase in Muslim hate crime is not reflected in the number of reports to the police. That in itself reflects the fact that we're picking up real concerns within the Muslim community of a lack of faith within organisations. That is really concerning.
The Home Office said in a statement, following recent events, we have also made further funding available to Jewish and Muslim communities to provide additional security at places of worship and faith schools. But for Jacob and his family, there's now a sense of unease that's here to stay. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
The Trump campaign has said it will file an objection to the decision by a second US state to disqualify Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential race, a move they describe as an attempt to steal the election. Maine has followed Colorado in saying the former president incited insurrection before the assault on the US Capitol by his supporters. 3 men who died after their vehicle was swept away as they attempted to cross the River Esk near Glaisdale in North Yorkshire have been named as Leslie Forbes, Scott Thomas Daddy and Patrick Hibbins. Police say the men, who were part of an off-roading group, were found dead inside the submerged 4x4 yesterday. One person has died after an E. coli outbreak linked in some cases to unpasteurised cheese. The UK Health Security Agency has confirmed 30 cases, and Mrs Kirkham's Cheeses have recalled all their products purchased between October the 1st and Christmas Eve as a precautionary measure. Yellow weather warnings have been issued for parts of the UK tomorrow. Let's get the latest from our correspondent, Emma Birchley. Emma, it's looking pretty dicey, particularly for those of us who are hoping to get away for the new year.
Yes, some pretty horrendous weather ahead tomorrow and into the early hours in places on New Year's Eve, with a number of yellow weather warnings issued by the Met Office. If you have a little look at the map, you'll get an idea of the scale. So going all the way from the Outer Hebrides, affecting most of Scotland down to the borders. So there the issue is snow and sleet turning to rain. Could be as much as 2.5 centimetres at lower levels. Heavy rain too in Northern Ireland, rain in Wales. And Wales affected as well by another weather warning for gusty winds that actually stretch all the way along the south of England and actually up into East Anglia as well, Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk. And we're told that some of the gusts in coastal areas could actually reach 75 to 85 miles an hour. So that is pretty hefty. And when you've got this kind of weather, you get the inevitable potential for disruption, whether it's power cuts or travel disruption or, of course, flooding. And you have to remember that there were tens of thousands of homes left without power after Storm Gerrit, and only today have many of them actually got that power back. The good news is, though, in theory, come celebration time on New Year's Eve, the worst of it should be over.
Thank you. Football players are threatening legal action over the increasing match demands that are being placed on their bodies. Their union has told Sky News there is little space for rest and recovery due to an increasingly congested football calendar. The welfare warning follows our analysis that a player could be required for more than 80 matches from next season. Sky's sports correspondent Rob Harris has been investigating.
If you think there's already enough football, prepare for the biggest change to the calendar in decades, with even more matches and a new World Cup from 2025. This one's for men's clubs rather than national teams. And it's a vast expansion from the Club World Cup that recently ended, with Manchester City one of 7 teams in a barely noticed annual competition. They'll be one of 32 teams, 12 from Europe, in a new-look Club World Cup. And Sky News has calculated a player could now be required for 86 matches for club and country. The additional workload for players concerns Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola.
I'm not against the new competitions. I'm against for the lack of time to recovery between year by year. This is what I'm complaining all the time. For me, it doesn't matter to play every 3 days, 6 days, 7 days. It's okay. But what is really, really tough, finish the season, and in 3 weeks, you have to restart again.
Looking to the summer of 2025, there could be barely 3 weeks until the new English season begins after the Club World Cup final. Here's how packed the 2024-25 season could be for one player, Manchester City and Belgium star Kevin De Bruyne. If City win this season's Premier League and Champions League, next August they'll have to fit in the Domestic Community Shield and Europe's Super Cup around the start of the Premier League season. Then from September to December, there'll also be their newly expanded Champions League, up from 6 to 8 games in the group stage, plus national duty. Add in another new FIFA competition, the Intercontinental Cup, and once the European season ends, more national team games are squeezed in before players are back with club teammates again, with 7 games in total to win the new Club World Cup. Players will be exhausted, their union fears.
I think this is a defeat for football. We as players and we as fans want to see the best players on the pitch and performing at the best level. And right now, with the current calendar, it's just physically, humanly impossible.
And looking ahead to 2026, there's even more with an expanded 48-team World Cup. Is wealth being prioritised over welfare, and can players cope with never-ending seasons?
Rob Harris there. Appropriately enough, time to hand over to Sky Sports News.
Leicester will end 2023 8 points clear at the top of the Championship after they beat Cardiff. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall scored the opener after 18 minutes for Leicester before James Justin made it 2-0. earlier. Southampton made it 17 games unbeaten after they beat Plymouth. Carlos Alcaraz put them ahead before this strike from Che Adams. Despite the late Plymouth goal, Southampton held on for the win. No doubt pleasing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who had made the trip to St Mary's. Elsewhere, there were important wins for Hull, Millwall and Sheffield Wednesday. MPs have recommended that unauthorised entry to a football match should be made a criminal offence as part of a report into safety at sporting events. The report was commissioned following chaotic scenes ahead of the Euro 2020 final at Wembley, where hundreds of ticketless fans stormed the National Stadium. Other recommendations include more safe standing trials, improved steward training and an alcohol consumption review. Under pressure, Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag says he's keen to work with new co-owners Ineos and the feeling is mutual. Ineos took a 25% stake in United on Christmas Eve and ten Hag is confident of a good working relationship.
The schedule is so condensed, so I didn't have the time so far to speak with them, but it will come, and I look forward. They want to work with me, I want to work with them, and we will have the conversations, the meetings, and so we will see.
Rafael Nadal says nothing is impossible as he continues his comeback from injury, hoping to win a 23rd Grand Slam title. Nadal, who's 37, will be competing at the Brisbane Open, his first tournament in nearly a year due to injury, ahead of next month's Australian Open.
I just have been practicing for the last month in a very good intensity. So I mean, I don't say that nothing is impossible, but at the end, for me, just be here is a victory.
Five-time world darts champion Raymond van Barneveld is into the last 16 of the World's Darts Championship. 56-year-old van Barneveld, who last reached this stage at Alexandra Palace in 2018, beat Jim Williams 4-1. He will now face 16-year-old Luke Littner for a place in the quarter-finals. That's all from us for now. Tune in to Sky Sports News for all the goals from the Championship. We're back a little later.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we are going to be taking a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by The Sun's Deputy Political Editor, Ryan Saby, and The Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams. Guess what? Among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of the Eye, their headline, New Year's rail chaos warning as staff shun overtime. That, much more, including honours, after this.
neither of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back. Time to bring you some breaking news. And singer Dame Shirley Bassey, director Ridley Scott and England bowler Stuart Broad are among the stars named in the King's New Year's Honours List, which has just been released. Now, they're joined by more than 1,000 other people, including the youngest ever award to a boy just 9 years old. Why? Well, here's our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock.
Diamonds are forever.
She sparkled for decades, and to her glittering career, Dame Shirley Bassey now adds Companion of Honour. With only 65 honoured at any time, the world-famous Welsh singer said she was truly humbled.
All of Europe is uniting forces against me.
Hollywood director Sir Ridley Scott, whose recent credits include Napoleon, has his knighthood upgraded, made a Knight Grand Cross. And the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who conducted the coronation, honoured personally by the King and made a Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order.
God save the King!
Novelist Ginny Cooper, Queen of the British Bonkbuster and friend of the Queen, made a Dame. And for Sajid Javid, former Chancellor, now a knighthood. From the political stage to the stages of Glastonbury, a knighthood too for festival founder Michael Eavis. In sport, cricketer Stuart Broad bowled over with a CBE. The same honour to former rugby players Rob Burrow and Kevin Sinfield for services to motor neurone disease awareness. And she didn't win the World Cup, but there's an MBE for goalkeeper Mary Earps. The honours list also includes former Sky News boss John Riley, awarded an OBE for services to journalism.
I see this particular award as a recognition of Sky News being a beacon of independent journalism in a world of a lot of rumour and disinformation.
And 9-year-old Tony Hudgell is the youngest honoured, awarded a British Empire Medal for his campaigning against child abuse.
I was shocked because apparently I was the youngest person to get it.
How special do you think that is?
Really special.
He's already met royalty.
I do like to write.
So that garden party won't be a problem. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Time now for the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the remainder of the hour, we'll be taking a look at the headlines with The Sun's deputy political editor, Ryan Savey, and The Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams. Plenty for us to discuss, but let's run you through the front pages first. And we start with the Mirror. It leads with the New Year's Honours List in a story that reports that more deserving candidates were snubbed in favour of Tory donors and supporters. A more positive story on the New Year's Honours headlines the Mail, the focus on parents who've been recognised for turning the anguish of losing their children into campaigns for social justice. Here's the Eye. Concerned with possible rail disruption in the new year, many staff refusing to do overtime as the prospect of renewed strikes looms. Guardian choosing to go with a report from a progressive think tank which says that public services, including the courts and the NHS, simply won't recover from excessive backlogs until at least the 2030s. The Sun says that Man City manager Pep Guardiola has warned his players not to flaunt their wealth on social media after England star Jack Grealish's home was burgled whilst he was playing. And the Star continuing a fine run this week, carrying the story about the benefits of beavers. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers whilst you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Ryan and Zoe. And look, there is only one place to start, because of course, while we have had the New Year's Honours, we've also had Liz Truss's resignation honours announced. Front page of the Mirror sums up well, one perspective on all of this. Heroes and zeros. And as we were discussing in the break, I suppose there are two things to say. One, there'll be plenty of people surprised that Liz Truss was given the opportunity to give these honours out. And two, that she took it. Ryan?
Yeah. I think most people will look at this when they see these headlines and just look at the sort of the sheer cheek that she's actually, got a set of honours to give out. The 3 peerages in there, 8 lesser honours. And she was only in Downing Street for 49 days, and they'll be asking questions, why have these people got the honours and got the peerages, especially at a time where they blame her for that mini budget and also their mortgage costs going up. So I think there'll be sort of big questions asked about this. The government will come back and say, well, every Prime Minister is entitled to, their resignation honours, and they'll point to people like Tom Watson or Shamik Chakrabarti for getting them. So there is argument in both sides, but I think just on the surface of this, I think people will be aggrieved.
They can make that argument. It doesn't mean that any of us have to believe it, because, of course, while she was entitled to them, she could have said no. She could have just pointed out, you know what, I wasn't doing the job for particularly long, didn't exactly end as I'd wanted it. Some people might feel this is cronyism.
There are basically 3 things going on. The first is that none of the rights she got on leaving office feel right to anybody, right? So that, she got that payment, that 115,000 a year to run her personal office, which is for exiting prime ministers. And everybody was like, are you kidding me? You're a prime minister for under 50 days. Now this, again, she's kind of really milking it for everything it was worth when she wasn't worth anything like the office was worth. So there's that problem. The second problem is the actual nature of the people she's ennobled. Mark Littlewood, who was the head of the IEA, was on the original list and didn't make the cut. But the other 3 are absolutely clear political allies. There's no attempt at kind of balance. There's no attempt to reflect the needs of the House of Lords. Obviously, electoral reform has suggested for a long time that there should be a 2 out, 1 in policy just to bring that chamber down a little bit. It's now over 800 people. So to see her, essentially ennobling people who are parts of the Leave campaign, which a lot of people just think should be put behind us, is, again, really problematic. But, if you're expecting Liz Truss to have some kind of class and say, no, thanks, but no thanks, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, there's Liz Truss on the front page there, alongside a photo of John Griffin, awarded a gong after also awarding the Conservative Party £4 million. Before we actually go through the list of who's been honoured, let's just hear from Liz Truss herself. And she said this: I am delighted these champions for the conservative causes of freedom, limited government and proud and sovereign Britain have been suitably honoured. Let's go inside the Mail and find out exactly who it is. Who has leapt out to you? The first guy that I'm spotting there is Wetherspoon's boss, Tim Martin, receiving a knighthood.
The funny thing about this is that he didn't actually donate that much to the Tory party, so it made me think it's actually a little bit cheaper than you'd think, because there are people here who've donated in the millions, but Tim Martin's donation was something more like 50,000, which, he could easily have lost in a card game.
Presumably it was Brexit as much as anything else when it came to Mr Martin. Sorry, Sir Tim, I should say.
Well, Tim Martin, he's on the New Year's honours list, but then you've got the other 3, the Vote Leave. There's a couple of Vote Leave, Matthew Elliott, John Moynihan, who also gave £20,000 to Liz Truss's leadership campaign. So again, that raises questions. And there was also a Deputy Chief of Staff who will also be going to the House of Lords. But it does bring into question, if you are donating to political leaders, does that tarnish any kind of award later on down the line?
Doesn't it just give the opposition, the opportunity to get a big old stick out and whack the government with it? John Ashworth, Labour, this list is proof of Rishi Sunak's weakness. Lib Dem Deputy Leader Daisy Cooper, Truss handing out gongs after blowing a hole in public finances, calls this whole honour system into disrepute. If ever there's going to be a national conversation about whether or not this is a proper thing for departing politicians to have in their gift.
There is certainly the case that very few things bring into relief just how many Conservative Prime Ministers there have been in the past 5 years, more than this, It's like you sort of accept it as the new reality. They don't last very long. They're constantly in crisis. And then as soon as you see the departing honours, you realise just how constitutionally unusual and destabilising it is.
And Labour were very keen to make the point early on that Rishi Sunak could have blocked this. Now, people in government are saying that this is just a matter of course that the former Prime Minister will have that chance to put forward their resignation honours. But they were making the point that this was a list of shame, and he should have come in to step back, go forward with the list.
But what do we make then of the timing of all of this? As we were hearing in our report just a second ago, these names were submitted back in March, and so as you mentioned yourself, we knew some of them because they were leaked out at that point.
I think mustn't we have thought that they would probably mostly be knocked back?
They were, but I think that in terms of the timing, I think it's very opportune. You've got the New Year's honours list, you've got, the end of the year. People are thinking about New Year's Eve, they're in the middle of Christmas and all the celebrations and what goes on with that. So it's a very good opportunity for them to do it. If there was any point over the past 9 months or over the next few weeks to do it, this is the moment. You can move on with the new year, come what next week.
We'll bring in the FT at the moment, but Truss, 3 allies to the Lords after her 49-day term. But again, it's the idea that presumably conversations could have been had between Downing Street and Liz Truss, pointing out that perhaps now is not the time, maybe even pushing it further into the long grass. But is this just simply a political calculation about the fact we're going to have a general election next year?
What, did they basically thinking that what's the point having a reputation when we're...
well, that, if you're going to talk about this, if you're going to talk about it, do it this side of the new year, and I don't know, the amount of whiskey that goes down on Hogmanay, a few people might forget about it.
I mean, I think that's a kind of fine calculation. I mean, and when I say fine, I don't mean good.
Yeah.
The problem is they're going to go, depending on when the election lands, people will either be associating the Conservatives with their eye-wateringly expensive mortgages and rents, or if interest rates have come down, they're going to be associating them with cronyism. If the COVID inquiry is landing some results, they're going to be associated with mismanagement on that score. So they really don't have in their gift the perfect time to have an election when nobody will be talking about their problematic things.
These people could have turned them down. I think there was one person who said they were too embarrassed to be linked with the list, so they actually walked away from it.
Let's, though, dwell on the kind of the more positive aspect of that, which is just come out, had the embargo lifted on it. This is the front of the Daily Mail. Their headline, I think, pretty accurate, actually, the most poignant honours of all. And these, of course, for the parents of, Molly Russell and Joanna Simpson, who took their pain and did something positive with it, did something incredibly positive with it.
I mean, Ian Russell's work on internet safety was really, what was so extraordinary about it was not just that he found all that kind of campaigning vigour in such a distressing, awful time, but that he was actually quite, he was quite searching, he was quite challenging to massive companies, like TikTok, like Etsy, like people you do not expect to see challenge at this in a kind of forum of citizen campaigning, and I think he has made an impact. I think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I was with Ian Russell yesterday. I was in the Cabinet Office when we were sort of preparing for the coverage today. So impressive, but he's actually thinking about the next stage already in this campaign. He's also looking at the regulator, the now formal regulator, Ofcom, and saying they've now got to have teeth to step in if social media platforms, step over the mark, and talk about working with the tech firms. So, to take down that harmful content. So he's not letting up just because he's got this honour.
And also, what's so interesting about that is that, there's a lot of lobbying goes on between tech firms and MPs, and you don't see that kind of campaigning zeal from elected MPs, but you do see it from citizens. Sorry, I said Etsy before, and I didn't mean Etsy, I meant Pinterest, so I don't want to slur them.
Thank you for that clarification. I suppose we were all discussing, we're all parents. I have to admit, find myself in the situation that he was. I'm not sure I could do what he did. Guys, let us pause there for a second. Much more coming up after the break, including this. We'll be taking a look at The Guardian. There we go. And this is, of course, about the courts and the NHS not recovering until the 2030s. Next, of course, picture of Glastonbury co-founder Michael Eavis, soon to be Sir Michael. That and more in a minute.
Neurodivergence is when you have something a little bit different with your brain, and neurodivergent conditions include Tourette's, which is what I've got, ADHD, autism, OCD, many more.
Neurodivergent individuals are very creative. Sam here, obviously, being a fantastic artist and student at LCCM. And we've done some research into this, and we found that young people aged between 16 to 24 are more inclined to see music and the creative industries as a place that's more, welcoming to neurodiverse individuals when they build their own careers.
I think for me personally, as I was diagnosed quite late when I was 16, so I've come into it at a time when people are already starting to get quite accepting of it, and I've found that in the music industry, everyone's always so understanding. I think creative people often are quite neurodiverse. A lot of my neurodiverse friends are musicians. We tend to congregate together, so I think it's a nice sort of community. It's just so lovely that he's obviously so happy to talk about it, which makes anybody who's got like a neurodiverse condition feel more normal. And I also think that it's lovely for somebody like me, who's sort of starting my career in the industry, to see somebody successful with Tourette's.
Yeah, and JD, it's not, Lewis Capaldi's not the only one. More are talking more loudly about it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think they all deserve huge credit. Lewis, I think quite a lot of people I've been watching right now saw his moment at Glastonbury, which was one of the moments of 2023 for me, where he struggled with one of his hit songs. I've heard it playing here in the studio today, and the crowd finished it. Music is about connection, and it's Lewis, Robbie Williams recently with his documentary. So many artists are being more and more open. They deserve a lot of credit, because it takes a lot of courage to talk about something so unique to them that is sometimes a real challenge.
And JD, explore for me a bit more this idea that creative people sometimes have some form of neurodivergence. It's, in that sense, something that can be celebrated.
Absolutely. That we're here to celebrate neurodivergent individuals, and it should be normalised. We shouldn't necessarily be having to have this conversation, period, because it should just become, naturalised across all creative industries, all walks of life, all sectors of business. And the UK music economy is so critical to our country. In 2022, it's worth £6.7 billion. So we really need to be encouraging and celebrating neurodiverse individuals so they can see that there is this career path available to them, because it's not only an amazing thing to do to be creative, but also a massive part of our country's economy.
Welcome back to the press preview. Ryan and Zoe still here. And Zoe, we'll give you the honours, given it's your paper. The lead for The Guardian. The courts and the NHS, not just, in fact, actually, but we'll start with those, not in a position of not recovering, for the best part of a decade.
The best part of a decade, for sure. They're talking about the 2030s, and they don't necessarily say the early 2030s. Now, the thing is that the courts and the NHS, they're quite easy backlogs to measure because they count their backlogs. But things like the number of councils falling over and going bankrupt, that's going to be massive as well. That's going to take years to recover. And what I think this reflects is there is a lot of conversation in and around Labour about establishing some kind of doomsday document which says we've popped the hood on all the things that went wrong in the last 13 years, and it's much worse than you think, and this is the mountain we've got to climb. Now, they have to land that really, really fast, because otherwise they're going to get stuck with a huge amount of chaos that was actually created by the austerity years and then later by the kind of distractions of Brexit. So they have to land it, but they also have to not campaign on it, because if they go into an election saying everything's going to be terrible for ages, that's not a great look.
Well, isn't the point? That's in paragraph 3, when Harry Coulter-Pinner, the IPPR director, said that, if we're going to sort this out, reform and higher spending are going to be needed, and that's the stick that's always used to beat Labour come election time.
And that's the trouble. There isn't much spending. So every time we've had a financial statement, whether it's been the autumn statement or it's been a budget, Jeremy Hunt has had limited headroom to play with. So, and there's going to be some traps set by the Conservatives going into that next election. That they've lowered national insurance. They're probably going to lower some sort of maybe income tax, possibly at the budget. So as soon as Labour gets in, do they raise them or do they not? Yeah. Do they want to fall into that trap straight away of raising taxes?
And I think, actually, when you look at this, because this is part of an IPPR report called Great Government, and they do have some ideas. They've got ideas in the kind of tax raising space. They've got ideas in the spending reduction space. And it's quite kite-flyy. You know, one of the ideas is that they bring in ChatGPT to run some public sector literature, which would save 24 billion. Now, I think 24 billion sounds toppy for how much that would save, and I also think that sounds like quite a long-term project. So, you know, it's quite easy when you're the IPPR to say things which are a little bit more out there than the actual Labour Party.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I do want to get our final story in the front of the iWeekend, and a story quite close to my heart because I'm supposed to be heading off in a couple of days myself. The rail chaos. Because, in part, you've got the weather, but you've also got these strikes as well, the threat in some areas.
Yeah, it seems like every time, you try and get on a train, there's, I got the train in this morning and, there was staff that are not turning up to work, there was trains being cancelled, sort of left, right and centre. You look along the board and, there's barely a train running. I don't think people would mind if they pay for, when you're paying good money for a service that you can actually get a seat. If you're going on that long journey, you're not standing in the aisle for hours upon hours. The catering, work.
But there you have the third kind of bullet point there. Ministers warn they will hold operators to account if they let passengers down. Where have they been? Where have they been for quite some time now when it comes to the rail network in this country?
Well, basically, the ministerial response to all industrial action and indeed all industrial relations has been if you ignore them, they'll go away. I mean, I remember speaking to the head of the Royal College of Nurses, who couldn't get into a room with the relevant minister for nearly 9 months after she took the post. So, it is testament, I think, to the sort of crumbling government and crumbling spirit of government that ministers say these saber-rattling things, but they don't really have any recourse if the strikes go ahead.
And you think the passengers and those people who use the trains just want ministers to, get the train operating companies to grab everything, by the neck. ASLEF is still, threatening strike action well into next year. They said they'll do it, up until the election or so. So, it just needs, people to get into the room and actually thrash it out.
But just in general, of course, this is going to be exacerbated. We've only got 30 seconds, but it's going to be exacerbated by the weather. And every year, for a handful of years that I can remember now, there have been problems when it comes to so-called public transport.
But is this not quite unprecedented? I mean, it does look worse than normal between the sort of hurricanes in Blackpool and the amazingly heavy rain. Do you go to Scotland?
It rained an awful lot over Christmas. Yeah, sorry.
So I don't know whether we're kind of looking at a climate change effect, which actually is going to make the industrial action seem like relatively small fry if trains are getting knocked off the rails.
But hey, at least it gives us the opportunity to do that which the British love most, talk about the weather. Guys, we will see you again next hour for more of the same. For us, though, time for us to take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And the rest of the year, I'm afraid, looking unsettled as yet another set of low pressure bringing heavy rain and strong winds to our shores. By early Saturday morning, the wet and windy weather will have spread across Ireland, heading into Northern Ireland and southwest Britain, with even the threat of sleet and snow over the hills. Elsewhere, a cold and frosty start, with icy stretches in the north. There will, I'm pleased to report, be some drier and brighter spells in the east, but it will turn increasingly unsettled through the day as strong winds, heavy rain and hill snow push northeastwards through the day. The winds will be particularly squally as the rain moves through, especially for parts of Wales and southern England. Rain heaviest over the windward hills. Snow could even fall to lower levels north of the central belt in Scotland. Blustery showers will follow from the west later. The year ends on a changeable note with a mix of sunny spells and blustery showers on Sunday.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.